Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the month of April, and more importantly, we're 26 days away from the 2023 NFL Draft. Very exciting stuff, and I cannot wait. And we're going to start getting the list of guys the Cowboys meet personally, and that's something we'll talk about in a later video. However, what we're going to do is recalibrate where we're at right now. The Cowboys have made moves, and we need to see what they need to do in this draft to really improve this roster. So what we're going to do is go through the needs that are currently present with this team as we are 26 days away from the draft. Now, before we get started with that, if you guys can hit the like button, that'd be awesome. Also, subscribe if you're new. Hit that notification bell as well. Over 78% of you guys watching are not subscribed, and you're returning viewers. So if you like what you're seeing and watching, why don't you stick around and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on new content when it comes out. Now, look, I understand that everybody's needs are different and how they value certain positions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through 5 position needs that the Cowboys have going into this draft, and you can argue on how severe these needs are, but down in the comments section, please participate. Tell me what you believe the Cowboys need to address in this particular draft so that they can become a better team and possibly go all the way in 2023. Not saying they will, but just tell me, what do they have to do? Now, before we get started, I did want to set some ground rules. Really, I only have one, and that is it's not going to be in any particular order. If you want to put it in order, by all means, with what you want to do in the comments section. However, it's just going to be from 1 to 5, no particular order, but I'm going to save the most important one for last, which, if you've been following me for quite some time throughout this draft process, you know what it is. So no shocker there. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. For me, linebacker depth is a need that the Dallas Cowboys need to tackle in this particular draft. If you look at their roster, them bringing back LVE was huge because if they had lost him, then you really needed to go out there and sign a linebacker or two. Now with them bringing back LVE, you have Damone Clark coming along. Micah Parsons, you can argue, is the hybrid from edge to linebacker, and they play him more at the edge rushing position. I don't really care. But the point is that if you look at like the true linebackers, as I put quotation marks on that, the Dallas Cowboys realistically outside of LVE and Damone Clark, bunch of question marks, right? You have Harper, Cox, and other guys that are just practice squad level dudes. And that's no insult or trying to make fun of these guys. It's just you don't know what you have. And so the Cowboys really need to go into this draft and just put some insurance back there. Because when Leighton Vander Esch got hurt, especially in that Jacksonville game, your defense basically fell apart. You would have won that game if he was there to shore up a couple things. So I don't want to be in a position where I have question marks trying to save the day. So go draft a linebacker, maybe two, and let's just make sure that we have something that can stabilize the position if the guys that are starting get hurt. You never know what can happen. So that's the big thing that I need the Cowboys to address to start things off. The second thing I need them to do is go draft a cornerback. Now, I understand that there are plenty of Cowboys fans that will come onto this video and listen to what I just said and be like, oh, Space Cowboy, why do we need a cornerback? We got Stephon Gilmore. We got Trevon Diggs. We got Jordan Lewis. We got Deron Bland. We got all these guys. We got the best cornerback room in the entire NFL. Why do we need that? You guys have to look at this two ways. First, cornerback depth. Outside of Trevon Diggs, Stephon Gilmore, and Deron Bland, or Jordan Lewis, if you want to put those guys in that type of caliber, who do you have outside of that? Kelvin Joseph, Nashawn Wright, you do have Israel Mukuamu, okay. But you saw what happened last year. When the Cowboys ran into injury problems, the depth wasn't good. That's what scares me, is that the Dallas Cowboys need another cornerback in there, not only for this season, but for long term. Stephon Gilmore's on a 1-year contract, guys, alongside Jordan Lewis being in a contract year. If you decide, okay, we're going to keep Trevon Diggs, we're going to pay him, and then you let Stephon Gilmore walk because ultimately, are you going to pay a guy that's on the other side of 30 and not knowing when he's going to hit that wall of age that's preventing him to be any better than what he is? I mean, that's something that's going to scare me. His cornerback 2 was filled for this year, but long term, I don't think it's been addressed. I think Deron Bland is going to be your replacement for Jordan Lewis, if that's the route you decide to go, but the other guys that are there aren't going to cut it. So you're going to need a cornerback in this draft. It's for the same reasons why you need a linebacker. Albeit with linebacker, you kind of bought yourself some time with how the contracts are set up, but with cornerback, bit more of a pressing need, not only this year, but possibly next year too, depending on how the Cowboys tackle that. So that's why cornerback is going to be number 2 for me. Again, no particular order, but that's the second need that I have. Next on my list of needs, number 3 is wide receiver. Now, I understand that some of you guys might be like, oh, Space, we already got Lamb. We got Cooks in the trade. We got Gallup coming back year 2 from the ACL injury. You got Tolbert, who should be better in year 2. And everybody else, why do we need another wide receiver? So let's talk about that, right? Lamb, absolute stud. All-pro wide receiver. We know what he can be and what he's coming into. Great. Then you have Brandon Cooks, right? We know what Brandon Cooks is. A consistent guy. Mr. Consistent, right? 1,000 yards with every single team he's been on in the league throughout his career. And he brings an element to your offense in speed. Helps you take the top off of defense. That's great and all. But then question marks emerge, right? And the biggest thing is in order to protect yourself from these question marks, you need some insurance. And that's where a wide receiver would come in handy. So let's talk about that. So Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup struggled last year. We don't know where he's going to be post-ACL injury year 2. Is he, 60%, 90%? Like, where is his range, right? If he is any inkling of what he once was, right? I'm talking about between 70 to 90%. Let's just say a solid 80%. If he's anywhere in that bracket, we're set at wide receiver 3. We're not asking Gallup to be anything special, right? We're just asking for him to be a guy that can be a consistent wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 2, depending on how him and Cooks look, right? So there's that. The other thing is Jalen Tolbert. We don't know where Jalen Tolbert is. I would think that with removing the option routes, it would make it easier for him to transition into the West Coast offense, and I think it will, but you don't know about him. Semi Fehoko, you had to count Kavontae Turpin into that mix, so there's no questions on why the Cowboys are looking for a wide receiver, right? And I think that if it were me, if they do draft a wide receiver early, I'm not going to be upset with that because you bring in a guy who's young, cheap, and on top of that, if things don't pan out with Michael Gallup in 2 years, you can hit the eject button, right? And then on top of that, with Brandon Cooks, if Brandon Cooks' wheels fall off, bam, you have a guy that's going to step up in the next 2 years of the contract. And that's really where I look at it is long-term wide receiver could be a need, and there are some guys that can help you long-term in this draft. But also make sure that you're all covered in the event that Gallup gets hurt or someone else gets hurt because, again, you don't know what Jalen Tolbert's going to be. You don't know what any of these other guys can be because there was a reason why the Cowboys got T.Y. Hilton and tried to go after Cooks last year, but here we are. So with that being said, wide receiver is need number 3 for me. Now moving on to number 4, and that's defensive tackle. When you look at the room, them bringing back Jonathan Hankins was huge. I would have loved if they would have brought back Carlos Watkins. They wanted to bring him back, but he ultimately went to Arizona. So now you look at that room, right? You got Jonathan Hankins. You got Osa Odigizua. You got Quentin Bahana, Neville Gallimore, and you just moved Isaac Alacorn over to defensive tackle, but you don't really have any other names outside of that. I mean, Osa's been fantastic for that Cowboys defense, and, him being a part of that rotation helps him keep him fresh and good at what he does. But what scares me is if Osa goes down or if Jonathan Hankins goes down like he did, you're going to run into some issues. So I think the Dallas Cowboys, considering Jonathan Hankins is getting up there in age, you might want to invest in a defensive tackle. I'm a big proponent of drafting one every single year, but the Dallas Cowboys need to look at who they like, and they've met with some guys at the defensive tackle position that they really do want both 1-tech, 3-tech, you name it. And I think that they need to go with who they trust best to fit into this room. Get some depth there. Let's cover our bases, and then let's move on. So let's go ahead. Let's move on to my final pressing need that the Dallas Cowboys need to address, and that's offensive line, right? Space, what about running back? What about some of these other needs? You can get those guys in the later rounds, and it's not going to be that big of a deal with how they moved around. People talk about tight end being a need or, a want. Look, offensive line is the biggest need. You're going to need to get someone that can be a left guard for you moving forward, especially because you're like, oh, you want to play musical chairs again? Let's just stop that. Let's go get the guard of the future and just call it quits there. That's where it really comes down to. The Cowboys need to hone in on making sure this offensive line has enough depth on it so where if guys go down, they're not caught with their pants down. So I think that going after guys like Steve Avila, for example, or Cyrus Torrance, whatever your flavor of the week is, at offensive guard or tackle, whatever you want, they need to go after it. Point blank period. Like, there's no question about it. They need an offensive lineman. If there's one need, they need to address it. By the way, the only position they really didn't touch, I understand they brought in Chuma Idoga, but realistically, that's the only position they really, really need to go after. But they don't have to do that in the first round. There are guys that they've met with that might be at pick 2 or pick 3 in this draft that they can go after. But outside of that, guys, that is my list of needs for the Cowboys entering April as we get closer to the draft. Your list might be different than mine. It most likely is, but please tell me down below what you guys think about it. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you agree and disagree on? Tell me down below, and make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. This is Space Cowboy Media signing out. Have a good one.